G'day ladies and gents, and welcome back to Star Citizen with Mags. Today we'll be taking a look at the Aegis Vanguard Warden. The AEG-3 Vanguard is the UAE's dedicated deep space fighter. Primarily developed as a bomber-destroyer, the Vanguard features extensive forward-mounted weaponry, including 4 nose-mounted Size 2 bearing M4A laser cannons, and a Size 5 chin mount that comes standard with a Size 4 Apocalypse Arms Death Ballistic Gatling cannon, but can be refit with the new Size 5 bearing M7A laser cannon, as you see here. It's currently the only available fighter-class ship that can equip a Size 5 weapon. The Vanguard is so named because its multiple jump range allows them to form the forefront of any military expedition, and as a result, according to the fluff, has seen extensive service against the Vandal. So let's take a look around her inside, see exactly how she's built, and then we'll take her out for a bit of a spin. So, starting directly behind the cockpit, we have these, looks like locker panels to the left and right hand sides of the ship. At the moment, these do nothing, but it is likely that in the future, once Item 2.0 is put in, these are going to carry the avionics and the ship's systems. This will be the position from which you do most of the maintenance. There is these hollow sections to the left and right hand side of the rails that look like something is supposed to be there. I'm assuming this will be more systems, possibly the shield generators will be placed in here at some point in the future. As we go back into the living quarters, we have beds to the right-hand side. Now, it may seem odd having beds in a military fighter, but the Vanguard is designed for extremely long-range roles. So, having kitchen, locker facilities, and sleeping quarters on board on a ship designed for a minimum of 2 crew on long-range missions actually makes sense. Now, to the right-hand side of the door, this is the door section at the back, we'll look at that in a moment, we have the weapons racks. Once Item 2.0 comes in, again, weapons and ammunition will be stored there. You'll be able to grab them on the way out. Smack bang in the middle of the roof, we have our turret. Now, we'll quickly take a look at this one here. Once activated, the seat drops out of the roof. And we retract straight up into the turret position. Now, the turret is armed with 2 Size 2 bearing Sawbuck Vulcan cannons. These are ballistic weapons. I'm personally not a fan of these. I'd probably want to switch these out. Ballistic weapons are incredibly powerful and do most certainly have a place inside of the space combat of Star Citizen. However, if you're going to use the Vanguard on a long-range mission, ballistic weapons comes with ammunition, and ammunition can be scarce and does run out. Equipping these with laser weapons effectively removes that problem, so I'd probably switch it over to 2 additional Size 2s, or possibly Size 3s if I could get them fit. Besides that, the turret itself has some pretty good coverage. The guns can get a slight 5 to 6 degree depression down from the turret position, allowing you to shoot down over the slope of the spacecraft, and besides that allows total unobstructed coverage of the entire hemisphere covering the top of the spacecraft. The turret position, of course, being the primary second seat for the co-pilot of the Vanguard in its 2-pilot configuration. However, it is not the only one. Now, we have one other area we haven't looked at here. Behind the little glass door, we of course have the space toilet, space shower, and the space sink and drawers. This, at the very least, answers the question of how exactly do they keep themselves clean in space on long-range missions. I kind of like the fact that that's there, but we'll talk about that later. And this is the 3rd crew position, the one that often isn't covered. This is the engineer's console. Now, weapons and missile systems are not available in this particular console, as these are directly controlled by the pilot's position. These 2 tabs are more for ships that don't have pilot-controlled weapons. But here we have the power systems. Now, the pilot can control this directly himself, although it is much easier if you have a 3rd person on board. And there's 2 parts you've got here. The left-hand side you have the power throttle, the right-hand side you have the power distribution between weapons, shields, and thrusters. An engineer manning this console, or a player manning this console, will not only be able to control the power distribution between the 3 primary systems for operation of the ship, but will be able to monitor exactly how much power is being used by the ship. Now, the more power the ship is using, the more visible it is on sensors. By controlling and limiting power usage, the person controlling this console will be able to effectively reduce the sensor signature of the ship while the pilot is concentrating on doing piloting things. He's also able to monitor the heat, power consumption, and I assume in the future will be available the ammunition of the individual parts. Again, you can't do anything in the components tab yet, but I'm sure it will be available in the future. And finally, we have the shield tab. Now, the shield tab, again, the pilot can control this directly himself, but sometimes it's nice to have somebody else that can do it for you. Again, forward, left, right, and rear shields, and you have a basic manipulator that allows you to shift power back and forth between them. So if the pilot finds himself in a position where he doesn't need the turret being manned, or alternatively has a third player on board, can have that player control the shield systems, rededicate power back and forth between the systems on board the ship, so the thrusters, weapons, and the shields, and then rededicate that shield power to whatever shields are currently taking damage. So, overall, this is a often overlooked but in very important console to have available on the ship, and it's pretty common amongst the military vessels that I've seen so far. Nice one to have. Then, of course, we have the rear exit, which folds out. Now, there's currently a glitch in 2.5 with this particular hatch. You only see black until you step through it. This didn't exist in 2.4, so this is a new thing. Hopefully it'll go away in 2.6. Don't worry about that too much. Just a small graphical issue. And we'll take another look from the outside in EVA, and we can get a sense of the scale of this ship. From the tip of the nose to the tip of the tail, not including the size 5 weapon I have equipped to this particular Vanguard, it's 37 metres long, weighs 45 tonnes, with most of the length and the mass coming in on the size 4 X-Forge engines that take up the entire pylons on the outside of the ship. You can see these long strip pieces in the middle of the screen at the moment, just above and below the tail fin. These are the manoeuvring thrusters. They're all over the ship to push it around, and if we jump in on the back, and I'll turn on the flashlight, see if I can get a good angle here, we also have reserve thrusters that sit in between the engine nacelles and the main fuselage that also act as forward propulsion as well in a thruster environment. So when you're in unlinked mode, you're not actually firing your primary engines to do a forward motion. There are actually thrusters to take over that for you. The forward-mounted thrusters to reverse thrust and counter thrust are mounted to the left and right-hand side of the cockpit in here. And of course, because I know it's going to pop up in the comments section, forward air intakes and wings and control surfaces on a spacecraft. Why? Well, most Aegis-designed spacecraft are actually designed for operation both in space and in planetary atmospheres. Now, the ship itself won't generate enough lift to be able to fly in an atmosphere on its own. Much like all other spacecraft in Star Citizen, it will require usage of gravity manipulation along with the massive thrusters that are on board in order to maintain flight. However, the winglets will allow it to use aerodynamics and to manipulate the airflow to increase maneuverability and, as a result, increase combat effectiveness inside of an atmospheric environment. Again, the air intake on the front of the engines could be for fuel scooping purposes in an atmospheric environment, allowing for at the very least possibly a reduction in fuel usage while operating in an atmosphere. Again, none of this is listed down on the paperwork for the Vanguard or for any of the ships for that matter, but it is the discussion that is going around. Until we have atmospheric flight in play, however, which will be in 3.0, we'll have no real way of testing. And of course, well, there is the third reason for it as well. It's the rule of cool. Let's face it, the ship looks absolutely amazing. It is one of the best looking ships in the game, in my opinion, at this point. And, well, it's science fiction, not science reality. If we were playing with science fiction, technically all the ships we're flying should be either spherical, tubular, or disc-shaped, because these would be the 3 most efficient designs for any spacecraft operating in a zero-G environment that had to interact with an atmosphere. Not particularly interesting to have a game that's all its ships are based around a simple geometric shape. Anyways, so we have taken a look around the inside of the ship. Let's go on and see if we can find something to shoot. So it occurs to me I haven't spoken about missiles yet. The Vanguard Warden has 2 size 2 pylon mounts for carrying missiles. Currently, the exact details on these missiles is unavailable, as the missiles are due for a full rework at some point in the future, around the time of Item 2.0. However, these missiles do appear to be size 2 themselves, and they appear to use infrared tracking as their primary means of locking a target. As a result, they're not particularly effective on large, heavily armoured, heavily shielded targets. However, they are very good for disabling light vessels, making them much easier for you to get your primary weapons on. Hopefully after the missile rework we'll be able to equip the Vanguard with a much larger, more powerful missile system for dealing with those highly armoured, highly shielded targets. So onto the primary weapon systems. Now this is something that I'm not particularly fond of with the Vanguard Warden. Due to the way the 4 primary size 2 weapons in the nose are fit, they can't be swapped out easily for simple weapon systems as with other ships. You need specialised versions of these weapons to be available, and currently they're not. So you're stuck with the 4 weapons you've got. Now, while you can change the chin mount, as I have done of putting the size 5, what this means is that the weapon systems don't perfectly align. As you can see here, I've got 2 lead pippers. The first lead is for the size 2 weapons, the second lead is for the M7 size 5 cannon. And as you can see, they don't line up when you're performing high-speed maneuvers. Now, this wouldn't be so much of a problem when the Vanguard is performing its primary role, which is that of hunting bombers, or other medium to large-sized spacecraft. However, it can be somewhat of an issue when you're trying to deal with small, highly maneuverable targets, which you tend to encounter pretty commonly currently inside of the PU and inside of Arena Commander. Now, of course, this won't be a problem once the game goes live, as the Vanguard will be used as the Vanguard is designed to be used. Currently, its role doesn't really exist inside of the current environment. You're currently forced into lots of dogfights with extremely small, extremely maneuverable spacecraft, and as a result, even with the size 5 weapon mount, it takes quite a bit more work than it would on an equivalent fighter of, say, the Sabre or the Super Hornet to get your kills. That said, when you do get the guns lined up, you really only need to hit them once or twice, and anything short of a military spec ship will vaporize. So, the other thing the Vanguard Warden is known for in the fluff is its ability to take damage and survive incredible amounts of damage. Unfortunately, again, this isn't currently reflected. Now, I'm expecting there to be a bit of a rework in regards to the damage modelling of the Vanguard Warden in the future, but it does have a couple of small issues. So first things first, let's talk about the shield systems, because it's the easiest one to talk about. The shields are actually fantastic. No complaints about the shield systems at all. They can take massive amounts of damage before they go down, they regen at a pretty acceptable rate, and it's really easy to rotate through them. Once you've mastered the art of shield power transfer, you can keep the shields up for an excessively long period of time. It's excellent. Not quite as good as the Super Hornets, I feel, or the Sabres with its ridiculous regen rate at the moment, but still very, very, very acceptable. The problem is actually in the hull itself. The hull of the Vanguard Warden currently is extremely fragile, which doesn't fit with the description that is available inside of the fluff. It's very easy to break. Small impacts, if you happen to lose control and accidentally clip an asteroid or a space station, will almost guaranteed rip parts of the spacecraft away. But more than that, with ballistic weaponry having the ability to, at least to some level, penetrate shields, applying damage to the hull of a spacecraft, even while the shields are still active, in player versus player combat inside of the PU, and of course inside of Arena Commander itself, it's not uncommon to see players with military-grade ships fit exclusively with ballistic loadouts having the capability to actually shoot primary components off of the Vanguard Warden while it's still in combat with its shield still up. The most vulnerable area is the tail. As I showed you in the walk around at the start of the video, the tail section of the Vanguard Warden carries the primary thrusters for pitch control, half the thrusters for lateral control, so strafing and yaw motion, as well as the primary engines, with the thrusters all being based around the tail fin section of the spacecraft. As you can see here, these are very, very easy to remove. In this particular circumstance, a player stole my ship while I was clearing my crime stat inside of the Korea space station, and he simply bumped the side of the station as he was taking off and sheared the entire back section of the spacecraft off. Now, the ship can still control to some level. The little thrusters in between the booms and the main fuselage will allow for forward motion, and lateral and yaw thrusters still do exist on the nose, but your thrusters are firing all from one direction, so it's very, very, very easy to get the ship into an uncontrolled rotation that cannot be corrected. While it is still possible to control the spacecraft with the loss of one boom using the roll motion to allow you to fire your thrusters in the opposing direction to counter this rotation, it takes an experienced pilot to do so, which is why it was hardly surprising that the thief of this particular ship, simply trying to take off, immediately gets it into a spin, can't correct, and winds up killing both of us. Now, as the vulnerability to the hull does go counter to the description of the spacecraft given by Cloud Imperium Games when the ship went on sale, along with new versions of the Vanguard coming extremely soon, specifically the Vanguard Hoplite, designed to drop off troops inside of combat environments, I expect the damage modelling of the Vanguard is probably going to get a rework sometime in the near future, just to polish that up a little bit, and it's probably going to receive a buff as a result. Overall, despite its downsides, I am extremely fond of the Vanguard Warden. It reminds me a lot of a Northrop P-61 Black Widow in space, with the twin-engine, twin-boom design, the turret mounted dorsally, and the extremely heavy firepower in the nose. I'm also very fond of the folding wings and the extremely angled look of the outside of the spacecraft, and of course it comes in black, which I really like. Now, one last thing that I need to address because I know it's going to pop up, especially with the look of this particular spacecraft. When I was talking about the engineering console earlier on, I was talking about power consumption and limiting your power usage in order to control and restrict your own signal strength, making you harder to detect. The design of the spacecraft does look vaguely like a stealth aircraft, so is the Vanguard a stealth fighter? Or does it have some form of stealth capability? And the answer here is no. All ships in Star Citizen will be able to control their own power usage to restrict their signal strength. It is not something that is unique to any particular class of fighter or ship in general. However, dedicated stealth ships such as the Hornet Ghost or the Sabre are able to not just control their power output, but also control specific parts of their emissions, such as their EM or thermal signature, making themselves significantly more effective in that stealth role. Now, the Vanguard Warden's fluff currently has no mention of this capability. That's not to say that there won't be that kind of capability fit to it at some point in the future. The ability to fit that capability once the ship goes live, or possibly a new stealth variant released at some point either. But currently, the Warden, no, not a stealth ship, even though it looks like one. Anyways, ladies and gents, I hope you enjoyed the video, and thank you very much for watching. Please feel free to leave a comment in the comment sections down below, and as always, remember to click like if you do, subscribe if you want to see more, fly smart, fly safe, and I'll catch you around the verse.